And we are on air. Hello. We're hold on one second. Hello. Today we're going to be talking about some recent happenings within Gamergate, and we're going to invite people on to generally share and discuss their stories and tell us their experiences and discuss the issues and topics of specifically a few operations that have been underway, or rather a few community projects to be more clarification on that. Specifically the Rebuild Initiative, the bill before Congress that is very troubling, and we do need to take action upon because it will promote online censorship from a government level, and that will cause us to be unable to voice our minds and opinions, and ultimately it's not going to be very good. And I don't think anyone is going to be in support of this. Not even people who have been like, not even the AG Euros are going to be in favor of this. I don't think, at least not in any public capacity. And also give an update on Operation Jazz Symphony, which is technically a success because the video has been sort of taken down, although there was no retraction given, so the success is not made yet. And yeah. So we will. Black Knight said he was going to be a bit late. I expected him to be here a little bit earlier, but he said that he had to go. So he had to go somewhere at the last minute. So he'll be at the quarter-hour mark. He should be back. In the meantime, Henry, what's up?
Oh, not much. I've been silent for a while, been busy with things.
That's fine. Was that due to burnout or just personal stuff or what?
Um, a little bit of both. I've been like I can have some work to do during the day, so that helps from like 9 to 2 p.m. every day. With the fact that as lately, like let's just take a few weeks ago, there started a huge amount of shitstorm and infighting between people in the social media, and I just kind of turned off my Twitter. And I have to say I've been much more relaxed, and I've been communicating in short bursts with specific people to compensate, but I haven't been on the public spectrum really.
Well, to be quite honest, I think that's the best use of Twitter is to not be constantly on it, arguing with people or tweeting things out. Or you have to look at Twitter as a means of communication platform for the wider public, not as a means of communicating between people you know or people you want to communicate with. For that, you should probably just follow them and DM them and arrange a Skype call or even share emails instead. You have a lot. It's a lot more private. It's a lot more personal, and you can actually talk with them as opposed to just writing 140 character long Twitters. If you like the public online forum for discussion, there's always 8chan and Kotaku in action, and it's a better use of it. And I do see a lot of people on Twitter using Twitter, well, I won't say incorrectly, but not taking it not utilizing it in the way that it is most effective. For instance, like I see a bunch of people arguing with agros, that's A capitalized GGROS, and essentially they're the ones that they're Arthur Chews, your Man in Blacks, your Sarah Butts, etc., your Brianna Woos. They're the people who do nothing but sit on a computer all day and look for stuff and look and post bait, look for dirt to churn up and post it on Twitter to attract your attention and get them to argue with you. These sort of people, they're not interested in treating you as a person or human being. They're only interested in their own cause, and in that cause they believe the ends justify the means. And doing so, they will not give you any iota of respect. So when I see people arguing with these folks, especially the ones I just mentioned, I internally facepalm. And it is very much a distraction from the entire cause of what Gamergate's really about. You don't want to play into the opposition's hands, and by wasting your time on Twitter talking with people about like arguing with these idiots, it's really disappointing and it really makes everyone involved look foolish at the end of the day. You have to consider a third person who has no stake whatsoever in any of this. going on Twitter and finding your tweets and reading them over. If you think that third party will think that you're both idiots, which they most likely will, then you have to reconsider what you're actually doing with your time on Twitter. It is a public forum, and people will look on that, and the internet never forgets. Now, I'm not saying I'm completely clean in this, and because I have argued with these people from time to time, but you got to choose your battles, and you got to choose them effectively. Basically, if you need to make a point, make it once, and then leave it at that. You don't need to keep on going on and on and on in nonsense, because the people who are arguing with us on Twitter are people who most of the people who are against Gamergate just know that basically the best option for them to do is just leave the whole thing alone, stay out of it. However, there are some crazy people who I legitimately believe are crazy in one degree or another, who just keep on going on about this. So it's really something that we as community really need to reconsider of what we're doing. I mean, I woke up today and I saw bait posted everywhere and people taking the bait. Even Thunderfoot took the bait recently from a man in black. That's kind of sad.
Oh, well, these answers, they live for validation, and it's easy to do in an environment, because let's just be honest, Twitter is the worst place for discussion. It's a good place to share an idea, not ideas, but an essence of an idea. But the issue with the fact that you can only share the essence of the idea with limited character count and the limitations of human language, you are bound to be misunderstood. And that then leads to these massive shitstorms, especially if any people of any notoriety get onto these things. They just burst out, and people get out and say everything they've been waiting to say. And when it comes to these bait and this repeating of the same subjects and arguments constantly, well, I have this policy that I have learned in the side of academia, that I have very little tolerance for bullshit. By bullshit, we mean things that you made your point and you're going to repeat the same with slight variation 20 times. I'm sorry that you adding more claims to your claim will not validate the earlier ones. Neither you attacking me personally or changing the semantics of my question validate your counter-argument.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I think the best example of this lately was the Al Jazeera debate. Who was it? There was Chu.
It was Arthur Chu. It was someone who works for Wham, whose name escapes me, Deanne Z or something like that. I can't pronounce her last name. And
yeah, Z.
Yes. And hello, Black Knight. We're just talking about some Twitter nonsense right now. And actually, we were getting into the debate between Chu and mainly it was Chu and Brooke, although the Hot Wheels was also there, and this Deanne Z and someone else who was a neutral party. It was an interesting discussion to read over and look at, although I think we've talked about that particular discussion a lot, so I don't think there's any new ground to cover. Essentially, the opposition got their ass handed to them in that debate.
Fact was that it just shows how, I'm not going to say stupid, I'd say there was some Olympic level of mental gymnastics to validate some of these claims that they made. And at the end of the day, when we asked a question from them, they asked us to validate the question's worth before they would answer it. And this led to the fact that we answered honestly and openly about the stances and facts that we have, while they dodged every question. And I consider it was extremely immature with one of the participants to start posting memes along the way. And that kind of shows us the level of the opposition.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. It's really a case of where we don't need to justify what we do at this point, because unless some groundbreaking revelation about some sort of sinister plot within Gamergate comes along, which won't happen because that's really tinfoily and stupid, there's no reason to say that we're the bad guys here. If anyone has questions about is questioning what we do in our cause, keep in mind that the best the opposition can come up with is calling us a bunch of misogynerds. That's their best argument, and it's inherently flawed and stupid. So we don't need to validate ourselves. There's no need for that. We do need to keep ourselves in check to make sure we're not, losing our skepticism or stuff or anything like that. However, when it comes to the main cause of Gamergate, which is essentially fighting against corruption, that's a noble cause, and we've had plenty of results, and we keep on making more headway. If this HP email is verified, that's another advertiser that pulled from one of these websites that we've been that we've been trying to go after, and it would be a great big boon for us.
Yeah, but when it comes to corruption, the only people who have any reason to promote or defend corruption are the people who are benefiting from it. May it be social, financial, or political gain. If you see any sort of benefit from that, you will defend it. So it only goes to show what kind of political system these and a cultural framework these antis function on, that they are willing to ignore what is the essence of what we are doing here. That we are fighting for the right for these people to voice their opinions and political views safely without any consequences, long as they agree with the fact that they should show them as subjective opinions that they are. When you go saying that this is a objective opinion, then I'm going to take issue with that. But I will fight to the death for the right that you have the right to say what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I just can't understand the mental gymnastics that goes into these ultra-authoritarian mindset that they possess. Like, if you think about the block list that people who use it, I just goes to wonder what kind of people are they that they are willing to let somebody else tell them what they should do, what they should listen. If you're willing to close your eyes because somebody says so, that says more about you and the opposition.
I agree. And on that note, I would like to move on to some more recent news. Specifically, for instance, this new bill that was brought to light by, I forget the congressman's name. One of the congressmen in office brought this to media attention, and other congressmen have talked about it, how essentially a provision in the recent bill, Black Knight, do you have the name of the bill? It was HR. Let me look it up. The recent bill before intelligence spending bill that's before Congress, HR 4681, is essentially has a clause in it that allows for the for unwarranted search and seizure of information from telecommunications and internet and online activity. It's inherently unconstitutional and it's very much a very bad thing, and it's not necessarily something that will. But the question becomes, how does this pertain to Gamergate? Because this has nothing to do with gaming at this point. Well, the reason why it's related to Gamergate is because it's about censorship, and we've been fighting censorship from the very beginning. If our voices are silenced, we will not be able to discuss about whatever issues we want to talk about, including corruption in the games journalism scene. And a lot of people with a lot of money and power would love to use that against us. It's something that it's very critically important that we get either one, the president to veto on, or two, for the law to be overturned otherwise, say through the courts or something like that. There's an online petition at the moment, and normally online petitions don't work. However, the White House has been consistent with responding to complaints from the public if they receive enough signatures. I mean, they even responded to a silly question about building a Death Star through government funding. So,
well, it's part of the White House program. If enough people sign on to a petition that mandated them to do a response.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, because
I
even
believe it was 20,000 was the threshold. Don't quote me.
I think it was 20,000. I believe they bumped it up to 100,000 after they had so many responses. But
yeah, because I heard something like that. I thought it was like 100,000 or something. But the thing is that like even Finland, we have when once this kansalaisaloite system was passed, this citizen start was that after the certain threshold, it will go to be handled. And I'm not sure, is it just an initiative from the White House, or is there a legal background in the fact that they have to answer? Because we hear they have to answer. Or is it just a program? And I was wondering about this bill, and I don't know much about American law, the Constitution, where for a reason I'm not there, or neither do I live there. The fact that you have this Grand Court, or what is it, the highest court that decides these cases. I
The
was
Supreme
wondering,
Court.
yes, the Supreme Court, how are they thinking that they could pass this?
honestly, I don't know.
It's in the name of security mainly.
Yes, that is the modus operandi that they work under. Essentially, essentially they'll say, oh yes, freedom of speech is important and your rights are important, but this is more important than your rights, which in this particular case is absolutely ridiculous. If there's credible evidence that there is a threat against the United States security, they already have the power and the means to already go ahead and take out and go after the bad guys. This bill essentially allows them to go after everyone and anyone, and there is no justification for it. There, you need to have a set of procedures if you're going to do something which impedes upon people's rights. It's something that should be obvious and apparent. And the only way I can see this being justified is if we were in a state of some kind of anarchy or cybercrime was at an all-time high, which it's not. Most people that use the internet just go browsing and through their Twitter feeds or watching YouTube videos or just discussing legal, perfectly normal things. It's really ridiculous that the idea that we need this bill put forward is even being seriously considered to this level.
Well, that's like the most interesting thing about I think about this is the fact that have they considered how much this will hurt the tech industry in there? Because I remember back when the SOAP thing first came out a few years ago. It was in one financial magazine that I read that there's a Finnish article, and it said that the United States government will only change its attitudes when the tech companies jump to Europe, because in Europe we have already that what could be called net neutrality. It has already passed. It's in the directives, and it's in the local laws and things like that. We have already, and I'm just wondering, like, that what does it take for the tech companies to go, I'm done with this, it's not worth it anymore, and jump to Europe? And what is going to happen then? Because only thing that I could see happen from treatment like this and bills like this is the death of America.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole thing is the reason why net neutrality is in trouble in America is because the telecom companies who basically control the flow of information more or less are heavily lobbying Congress to pass laws to make it so that net neutrality is done away with. So it's one company, it's one area versus another. So yeah, it's basically the telecom versus everyone else at this point, but because they are so large and have so much money and so much control, that's why this is still an issue in America. It would be like how we don't have universal health care in America, really, and that's because the insurance companies are so powerful here. Although, going back to a previous statement you made, John, I was wondering, because this is an issue of security, how would you then argue that turns into an issue of censorship?
I would argue that it turns into an issue of censorship because interested parties can abuse the system to their own ends. We already know that the government and corporations have a very, very, very close relationship with a lot of policies and lawmaking and with lobbyists, etc. If people involved in the government want to abuse the system, it opens the doorways and enables them potentially to use it to corrupt ends. And if there's no need for it, those options should not be available to begin with. That's the concern for censorship.
So it's basically you have the one thing, and then you think there will be a corroboration between the corrupt ends.
Exactly. It's something that is not only it's something that's very likely. I don't believe personally that the NSA and the FBI, etc., the people who do already have access to what we're doing are inherently corrupt. However, that they have such options and such power is something that should be leaving us with skeptical inquiry and to question that power. The power that they have is not, like I said before, it's not necessary. Like I've said this on other streams before, but in my opinion, the ends only justify the means if it's absolutely necessary. And to the best of my knowledge, this provision in the bill is not absolutely necessary, especially since it allows you to search and seize information without warrants, without going by the proper channels. And the only reason why you would want to not go by the proper channels, well, perhaps not the only reason, but the most likely reason is that does leave something to suspicion, and it does. What was it? I apologize. Hold that thought. I just had a brain fart. I can't get it.
Well, can I add something in between then? I think the issue with censorship comes between what point does the government say what is radicalism, what is hate speak, and what is dangerous? At one point, let's just say, if you want to speak about reforming the governmental systems of America, and that is an automatically threatening proposition to the current governmental structure, can that be considered a radical opinion? Should it be silenced by the authority? The issue comes unless you have a certain clear definition, which with language is impossible to do, because you can just change the semantics of your statement. But unless you have a clear parameter upon to which decide that this is hate speech, this is radicalism, this is dangerous, then it's going to lead to the fact that actually I don't like their opinion, it could be threatening us in the next elections, silencing from the name of the national security. Like 1984 was supposed to be a scare scenario, not the building blocks or the plans for the modern society.
Absolutely true. I don't think most people who read 1984 realize it's a cautionary tale. It's not an ideal model of government. I don't think the people who are even in favor of this provision in the bill, that is, I believe it's Section 309 of the intelligence spending bill, really think that way. They don't really want to impede rights for the good of the own people. Actually, they think it on a certain level, but they don't believe they're doing this as a means of control. They're doing this as a means of quote-unquote security.
Won't someone think of the children?
Well, if you remember what happened in the comics and the movie, the reason England got to that state in the fiction was because people were willing to give up freedoms for safety. It was all done in the name of safety. So, in a way, you could imagine it like that basically the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Agreed. And that is what I believe is the mentality behind the people who want to pass the bill. And it's quite dangerous, really. And we really should be as up in arms about it as we were against SOPA and PIPA, because those laws, we saw that they were problems. They gave the government too much power, and we realized this. And although there was nothing inherently malicious in the law, it was the fact that they had this power that raised alarm bells and raised cause for concern. It's an issue of trust, and and we shouldn't have this level of mistrust of the government. The government should serve the interests of its people, not the other, not merely the corporations that financially back it. It's ridiculous that these laws are being considered, and although I understand why we're not as up in arms about it, because this news came about to us relatively recently. I mean, it hasn't even been a week since this kind of broke the internet waves. There should be more of a pushback against it.
True, and I think it comes like, that is why I say to people, go to vote. If you disagree, like, if you think that your government, well, I don't know to what degree it is corrupt, but if you think the people are morally corrupt within the system, then don't vote them in. I have noticed a pattern with these countries that often complain about issues like these, and that's that the same people are always in the as the people's representatives. If you disagree them, vote to somebody else. Vote the independent party. Do whatever, even if you know that your vote will not be. I mean, that, like, if you know that the independent could not win in million years, it is a statement when they announce the poll numbers that the independents got this much votes. That's what matters. And once the dragons, what you call them, the dinosaurs of the government realize, oh shit, our seats are being threatened because the values of the society are slowly changing to another direction, they will have to adapt or they will be wiped out. Go out, vote, and vote for something else. Vote for somebody whose opinions and values you agree on, not who agrees with your values. Basically, vote for issues, not for personalities.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's kind of. Hold on one moment here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay, good. As I was saying, that's never going to work in America because that's kind of not how things roll here. The last time we tried something like that, it was Ross Perot and someone else, and we all know how well that turned out.
That is true. But at the same time, at the same time, like, I think Henry's point was, we shouldn't consider votes that go to losing candidates as having been wasted. For instance, I voted for Mitt Romney not because I in any way thought he would be a good president, especially after he said that 47% of Americans don't matter, but because it was a vote against Obama, and that was highlighted by the news, and it really showed that Obama is not this great uniter; he's actually a divider. He hasn't successfully been able to lead his presidency effectively. I knew cast my vote, Mitt Romney was going to lose, but ultimately decided to make the decision because it would make a statement rather than it would actually get someone elected in that particular case.
Well, to be fair, it's not like Obama really had a chance to unite the country when the other side's total objective was, even at the cost of destroying the country, to delegitimize him and make him a one-term president. You can't really be a uniter when the other side just wants you dead. It's kind of like saying, oh, we haven't united gaming because we can't make inroads with the anti-GGers when they want to see us destroyed. It seems like a little disingenuous of an argument there, John.
To clarify on that, then, I would also say that Obama didn't, but it's not just that Obama didn't just unite the parties or whatever. I didn't expect him to. Of course, they're not going to really work fully together. There should be some level of cooperation where they can prioritize on what really matters and get those bills passed in a way that makes sense. For instance, if Obama didn't push the health care bill so much, then he probably could have focused on bigger issues such as the economy.
Healthcare is a major part of the American economy, though. It's taking up, I believe, like 20% now? I'd have to look up the exact numbers, but it's a major influence because it's employer-based as opposed to government-based. So it has a major impact on the economy. If you're talking about the Republican recession that was caused during the Bush administration, then yeah, I mean, he did have the stimulus there, but that was extremely watered down to be not as effective at all because he tried to reach out to Republicans to have a cooperation to get something done, but it was just being stonewalled the entire way, to where he had to even kowtow to the conservative bloc of his party to get something passed.
And yet, in the first 100 days, he couldn't get anything done. I really don't give a fuck.
That's the beauty of the filibuster.
I don't care. He has absolutely no excuse for half the crap that's been going on. It's like, this is all on you, buddy. You're the fucking leader. It's all on you at the end of the day. Is how I see it.
Really. First off, it's a two-way street. Congress and the presidency work together. We don't have the unit. It's not like a parliamentary system.
I have a different view on that. When the government's working together and things are flowing smoothly, that's when you need to start worrying, because it means they're all in agreement.
It's efficiency. I thought we wanted efficiency.
Well, no, we want the most inefficient government possible, so that bills like this can't get passed.
Then you must be loving it right now.
Oh, I'm totally loving it. It's absolute destruction. It's glorious.
Jason, would you identify yourself as an anarchist?
Hell no.
He's a Lolitarian, probably.
I identify as a very, very, very hardcore or drama cat, so thank you very much.
All right. But I have to say that the argument for an inefficient government, if you want a government, like, there is an argument there, although I wouldn't argue for on the basis of inefficiency. I'd argue on the it would have to be argued on the government shouldn't be any more powerful than it needs to be. There is a case and argument for that. But you can't argue for a government that doesn't do anything, because the government does serve a very, very vital function. That is the protection and security of the United States, first and foremost, and the running of the country for the needs of its people. So if you have a government that doesn't do anything, the whole system that we have kind of falls apart.
Well, I'd say, like, how I see it, because I hail from a different culture, is the fact that I've been trying to warp my head around the American systems, and especially the decisions and programs that have been done. And the reason they've been so ineffective is the fact that the parties cannot agree in the smallest things, in the most petty matters. They cannot agree, and this creates this patchwork system that is barely able to function, and if it's able to function, it's extremely inefficient. And the fact is that when the system should be done in a way that the parties agree that it should function, but because the spectrum of opposites in American politics are so vast, there is no way you can get them to agree on anything, which leads to the fact that nothing will be done, and there will be no results, and nothing changes.
Basically, the whole process is meant to be ineffective.
Duh.
It's not like a parliamentary system where you have one group that has all the power and basically is able to just do what they want until they somehow fuck up enough that that even being able to call your own elections won't save you.
Yeah.
American politics, otherwise known as the greatest grudge match on the world stage, in which we all lose at the end of the day.
I'd like to quote Don Rosa in one of his books, The Life of Uncle Scrooge. Or was it Scrooge McDuck in English? I don't know. But the thing is that he said, like, there's a scene of this insane things going on, man riding horses backwards, and said, is the circus in town? And then Scrooge McDuck says, no, this is politics.
That's actually a very, very good. That's actually very poignant. But anyway, we kind of diverged off topic from what I wanted to talk about on the stream today. I did want to talk about, like, the censorship bill. Like, I think that I don't know if anyone's going to really be in favor for it. I just wanted to get the word out there about it and basically let people be aware. to sign that petition, and also contact your representatives, tell them you don't want it, have a phone call with someone, with the secretary, or write a letter to them, email them. It's very important that this bill does not get passed, and it's very important that we make a big push against it.
Yeah, at this point, the courts are going to be a best bet because Obama wouldn't veto it because it would be a political landmine to say, oh, he doesn't care about the security of the American people if he did veto it.
Well, the thing is that I'd say that if you want to make your decision, whatever it may be, I will respect it, but be informed about the consequences of your decision.
Yes,
that's
it's going to be
the morally right ground to be. Once, like I said, when I've been drafting people their ethical statements, there's two things I have always said: be honest and inform your consumers of what they are going to get into. That's all.
Black Knight, to argue against your point there about the president not caring about security if he vetoes the bill, the reason why I don't believe that will be the case is because we have, over the course of the past 10, 12 years, or rather I should say since 9/11, we've had so many security enhancements, so much more power has been given to the government already, to the various organizations, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, etc., that having an actual law on the books is it's redundant at best, and it's an impediment on our rights at worst. So the argument that essentially we need this bill is not founded because the presidency and the government agencies already have power to this extent presumably when it's necessary. This just gives them more power that they don't need, and it can't be argued that it's for security when it is not necessary and when it does impede on the rights of the people, which is that before you actually seize or censor something, not censor, actually, the government shouldn't be censoring at all for 99% of the time. When you have a law that allows for the seizure of information without a warrant, it violates the Constitution and it violates our inalienable rights. So it's not a case of where this is being passed for security. People need to, if the public was aware of this, and I believe that they would be, and the information's out there. People who have been on the internet looking into this probably are aware. But if we made a bigger push for this, people were more aware of it, there would be no one who would be saying at the end of the day, well, Obama doesn't care for security. Although some Republicans, the RNC might take that strategy, though.
They would. Just to do the counter that I'm just playing the devil's advocate in terms of this one. First off, the RNC would do anything to make Obama and the Democrats look bad, so they would go that. If you actually saw when the back in, I believe, 2002, when they were setting up Homeland Security, they set up the department, but they specifically made it so that the workers of the Department of Homeland Security wouldn't have the same working rights as other departments, to put the Democrats in a catch-22, because if they vote for it, they'd be alienating the unions. So in the end, they end up voting against it because how badly it would have been that, it's like there wouldn't be collective bargaining, basic worker rights, and then the Republicans just beat them over the head and said that they put politics over the safety of the American people. This would be the same issue here. The other thing would be and then the other thing is you greatly overestimate how much people care about just their privacy. I mean, look at the current generation, how much they use Facebook and put all their information out in public. A lot of people don't care, are just so narcissistic that it wouldn't matter to them. I mean, this is probably one of the most public generations out there. I mean, yes, some of us do actually care for our privacy still and don't have Facebooks and that sort of thing, but a lot of the American people, especially the younger generation, just don't see privacy as a major issue. So even if it did come publicly out, people wouldn't care. It would be like the warrantless wiretapping and saying that it's they can spy on American people, or it's like PRISM. When that all came out that they were collecting all our data on the internet, there was just a collective shrug. Same thing's going to happen here, unfortunately.
Well, I think you are mistaking a few things. I'm sorry. Do you want to do your little voice now so I can continue with the real point? Go ahead.
No, the joke's been ruined.
I'm sorry for you, but anyway, the thing is that I think you're mistaking a few things. That privacy doesn't necessarily, like, let's just say open society is a safe society, but the fact that you don't need to have privacy to respect the right to say things. Like, you can't be open and safe. That is assuming that the framework is there that you can say things safely. But as we see that there are these even cultural environments in which there are taboo things to say. Let's just look at political correctness. You can't talk about certain things. In America, for a long time, I have understood that just saying men's or boys' right is a social taboo, and you will be censored at the personal level by others or by the public pressure. So there is nothing wrong with being an open person or an open generation, but the issue comes in when other people try to take your right to be safe and to voice your opinion.
But then that just becomes a slippery. I mean, it's like you have to make the connection between how would the government you having these then lead to censorship. Yes, they can spy on you and then look for that, and there is the risk of abuse, but it's still you have to have more concrete evidence than, oh, obviously it's going to be abused to make the argument that this is going to lead to censorship.
Yeah, well,
at this point, all you have is that it's infringing on people's privacy. It is still a massive leap to say it's going to lead to censorship. I mean, you have to have evidence that, I mean, we're still, even with, you know, all the prejudice against Muslims, we're still a bit away from McCarthyism, where just disagreeing with someone will label you a terrorist. I mean, yes, you have the SJWs doing that, but at this point, they might have their little inroads, but they don't have their mitts in the government at the moment to an extent where they can actually focus on policy on a major extent. Yes, they can get crap like no means no in California, but
well, it is entirely possible that there is no malicious intent with the law. That can just because you can't really measure intent, you can't really know what people's intentions are unless you're inside their heads. However, absolute power does corrupt absolutely, and the fact that this power is unnecessary because, like I said, we already have executive orders and other provisions in the law to make necessary security, to take necessary action in the name of security. That they need another provision is a major problem, and I can only see it being more harmful than helpful because, again, there's no need for it. There's no need to say that you can take private information from phones and the internet, as has been determined by law by the courts, that you kind of need a warrant for this stuff. It's not a necessary thing to enact in law, especially not by Congress, and it will eventually get shut down. The courts, I believe, but it would be best if we could nip this in the bud.
Well, the counter-argument there would be this bill was created to deal with the bureaucracy. I mean, if there's immediate threat that you need to know about, you need to listen in there, and you don't have time to go to a court to get a warrant. And if there's so much going on, and then, of course, it also tears down the walls of bureaucracy to where local police are able to have the same abilities as the state and federal ones. So would that mean you're impeding the police from collecting data for our safety? Just a reminder, I'm playing devil's advocate before you think I'm a government shill.
I'll let Jason take this.
Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? I'm calling it. I'm just waiting for the new McCarthy hearings.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point because we have seen what happens when we do enable power in the name of security, leading to just outright atrocious things such as McCarthyism, where they were essentially rounding up anyone who identified as a communist or may have even be suspected of being a communist and hearing them before courts based on mere suspicion rather than actual facts and credible evidence. So that's actually a very good point. To
That would have been
address-
a personal axe to grind, and him just pushing his career. And
What have you got to hide? Why would you need
Exactly.
privacy? If you're not doing nothing bad, then you ain't got nothing to fear from the good friend our government. Unless you're a commie or a hippie sympathizing American hating raghead who wants to plot to blow us up.
yeah.
Well, like somebody said, you have nothing to hide until you do.
basically,
Yeah. Well,
And then of course comes in the counter argument of a Supreme Court justice said, "Don't ever talk to the police. Don't do it. Don't even
well,
think about it."
to be fair, he was talking about the colored people. Fuck the police.
to specifically address Black Knight's point that he made of basically there being too much red tape impeding the government from doing what its job is necessary. The red tape is usually there for a reason, so that way the powers that be do not abuse those powers. In this case, the powers that be being the government specifically and the organizations that work under them. I don't believe that argument works because the system we have, because you would have to, in order to make that argument, you have to make the case and prove that the current system we have is a credible danger to the United States security. Over the past 12 years, since in the 9/11 era, there has been very few terrorist attacks against us, and the ones that we have had have not been a major credible threat to the point where we could have just enacted laws in order to stop that. Even if you could prove, like, say, the Boston bombing massacre that happened recently was a credible threat that could have been prevented through security measures, if you were able to prove that, you'd also have to be able to show that the benefits of having these measures outweigh the cost, which I don't believe anyone can make the case. And the fact that we have been so successful against terrorist activity, considering that we haven't had another 9/11 happen at this point, and God forbid that ever happen again. But I do believe that there is always a danger of that.
Well, wouldn't the counter argument then be that because even though we've been successful in thwarting so many attacks, there are still some that have occurred either domestic or abroad, you need to have more powers for the government to be able to combat them. Also, in terms of you saying that the red tape is there for a reason, if you think that there's a credible threat that needs to be dealt, what information needs to be collected, that red tape becomes an issue. That was part of the reason of the Patriot Act to deal with the walls between the CIA and FBI.
Mm-hmm.
So I would see that as an issue there.
I would counter that argument by saying that first, there cannot be a perfect solution, and two, the cure is often worse than the disease. If the government becomes a problem to the people, that's kind of a bigger issue than if the terrorists are a threat to our security, because terrorists can only do so much. Now, they were able to kill 3,000 people in a single day, but ultimately, if the government affects the hundreds of millions of lives affecting the United States in the name of security where their rights are being impeded, that to me, because they have such a bigger effect, would be the greater issue at hand. That's not to say that 3,000 lives compared to the well-being of millions of people having their rights impeded. I mean, it's not really something you can tangibly compare, but it would still be a big problem.
Well, the problem there is you're overvaluing just the people's lives who are lost as compared to the economic damage. Because how many billions of dollars from the recession and then just from everything else in terms of the shockwaves from the attack itself, not just the immediate people who were killed.
Well,
so you have to look at it from an economic sense as well.
On the economic front, would not an impediment of security have... I don't know if I can keep arguing this way.
Use simpler words than impede. How about that?
Okay.
Here, I'll summarize it for you. What do you think the terrorists wanted in the first place? They wanted you to live in fear constantly so you would sign away everything just to feel safe again.
Well, actually,
they wanted you to be absolutely fearful of your own damn shadow.
I wouldn't say that. The one thing is they
Fucking
want to
hell,
have.
it took us nearly 13 years to get the trades, just one tower rebuilt. Should have just rebuilt them the same way they were before and then dared them to try again.
Yeah, the whole
But,
issue
you know,
kind
that's
of like
just my
Al
whole
Qaeda.
fuck these
They wanted the removal of American bases and presence from Saudi Arabia, and then the original intent of Al Qaeda was from the what was it? Bin Laden was a part of what was called the Muslim Brotherhood, which saw the Western culture as an invasive element on Muslim nations, and they wanted to remove that. So it's more of just
invasive element. Unless they're helping us kick out the commies, in which case we are A-okay with that Western.
I just want to say, as a outsider to this little circle jerk of yours, the way American government kind of behaves is something that kind of begs blood out of their nose. Let's be honest here. When you say national security and bomb people who live in mud huts, I'm thinking like, you're going to anger more people than please. And that's going to get onto you. Like, if you remember, what started the insurgency in Arabic countries that were targeted by your wars is the fact that things leaked of like people being tortured in prisons. That material was just basically propaganda that this is why you should join our little terrorist cell. You did horrible things to people, the people's brothers. You bombed their families. You gotta understand it from their perspective. When a when a warrior comes to a king's hall and slays the king, he can be villain or a hero, but for the king's loyal subjects, he's the most horrible villain there is.
Yep,
You
that's
gotta
right.
understand it from the different perspective that you're demanding safety from consequences of your own actions.
Make it sound like I'm actually defending this. I'm just being the devil's advocate.
No, I mean, like, this is my whole view of America. This little circle jerk going around, and you keep ignoring the fact that your actions, your own actions, are the things that are fucking you up.
Oh, if you're talking about the
Funny,
whole
seeing
torture
as how
issue,
Al-Qaeda
yeah, a lot of
and
people
Hold
are
on.
against it.
Can I get a point in?
Go for
Is it going to be relevant?
it.
It's kind of funny he brings that up, seeing as how Al-Qaeda was more or less our creation to, like, kick out the Soviets from Afghanistan in the 80s.
You're thinking of the Mujahideen.
Well, it's the similar thing here.
I
No,
mean,
no,
it
actually,
was
no,
Israel,
no.
we just gave them
To clarify.
technical and financial support.
To clarify, the Mujahideen was a separate, was something that happened in the 70s or 60s. It happened before the events Jason was talking about. Because during the Cold War, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, instead of getting directly involved, what we did was we through the CIA, we armed the rebels there with guns and weapons, including Al Qaeda. Because at the time, Russia was our enemy, not Al Qaeda. Then Al Qaeda
The
turned
Soviet
heel.
Union, let's be exact.
Yeah, we kicked out the Soviet Union and kind of left a power vacuum and went, we're not dealing with this.
Pretty much. And
So, yeah, this is all our fault.
in a way, yes, but also in a way, no. It depends on how you look at it. Well, we certainly did make mistakes by not trying to correct the problem that was there. It just wasn't apparent to us that Al Qaeda would turn against us, although it should have been, considering that ultimately they were only siding with us to get rid of one player and then they would deal with the other, because they were essentially our enemies because of the philosophy that Black Knight was talking about earlier of the Western civilization being a threat to the Islamic world in the Middle East, which they inherently believe. Now, when it comes back to the whole security issue, just to keep this a little bit more on topic, if the argument's being made that essentially, if the argument's being made that basically the security measures being done to stop another 9/11, this won't stop another 9/11. It won't. Simply put, Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations have huge networks that do not require that can get around or do not require internet communication. They can already contact each other through other means and
How do you know?
opportunities, and we don't have.
I'll just tie a note to this camel's back and then kick it off into the desert.
Well, how
Well,
do you
make-
expect that they get videos out of a desert cave in middle of godforsaken nowhere?
Well, yes, they
uploaded
do
to
use-
YouTube?
Yeah, nothing is connected, especially if you want to do another operation like on 9/11. You will have to have some communication that's digital within the United States.
Good luck
True.
following me, NSA. I'm
True.
behind
However-
7 proxies.
However, they will find a way. There will always be people who will be able to have the means, including our enemies, who will have the means to communicate each other under the radar without the NSA or CIA getting involved. They'll be able to communicate.
They would know. It's just, I mean, the CIA and the NSA would have the data. It's just a matter of translating it or deciphering it so you understand what it means.
Right.
So at least this, I mean, with this spy bill, basically all it would mean is it would be much easier for them to access it. Yes, there is the big threat that this will be greatly abused, and that will probably happen. And once that does happen, there will be an outcry to see that this is reevaluated. You also have to remember that this is a sunset bill, where that this has to be voted on every year. So even if it is this year, there is the chance that in coming years you could have this language taken out.
That
So
is
just
true.
you also have to remember that this sort of bill is the sort of thing that's not the end all that's permanent.
That is also
Oh.
true, and I
And
do
in terms of if
see-
you're going to do an argument against me in terms of warrants, you should have brought up the FISA court because they do allow warrantless wiretapping and searches for up to 5 days, I believe. So if you're going to be
Yeah.
doing arguments like that, just remember that for the future.
Can
Yeah,
we just
honestly,
all
I-
agree we need to repeal the Patriot Act at this point?
I
But-
don't have a strong opinion on the Patriot Act. I think that there were some provisions in there which were troubling, but ultimately I don't think the I don't have strong opinions on the Patriot Act. I didn't research it, so I really can't comment on it. And I
didn't research it.
no, I will.
So I'm
fully
gonna
admit-
talk about
research-
it.
I will
They're
fully
all-
admit when I'm in the dark about something. So when it comes to the Patriot Act or the current, I do know we have current provisions. I just don't know what they were. So that would be something that I should look into if we're going to keep on pushing against the HR bill, especially if people are going to actually defend it. I don't find that very likely that the public would defend it because it's something that should be apparent that's a very bad thing. That it's the seizure of your private communications that historically requires warrants and actual, legal processes in order to obtain, and can't just be done with any knee-jerk reaction based on the word security. I mean, we do need to keep our freedoms in check, otherwise we will lose them, and it would lead to, what was it?
The slow descent into our cyberpunk dystopia.
Well, imagine this. Let's take there's a person who has been convicted criminal. He puts a message out that says, and I quote, "Tonight we act." What would that say to you? From one perspective, that will mean that today he's going to attack against us and destroy us. Another hand, it could mean that today we are going to act a play. We are going to go out as a performers. It's an issue when you don't know the intentions or any of the information and you judge based on possibly incomplete data. That means that either you have to go to the one extreme or the other. Or you either ignore it or you get all the data. There is no middle ground. So yeah, it comes like if you intercept a message from a convicted criminal saying tonight we act, let's just take devil's advocate position and Kelly and give your position. What would you do with that information?
If I had information that someone was going to launch an attack, it would depend.
No. All you have information is that he's a convicted criminal of some major offense, and he put out a message saying tonight we act.
What's this? I'm not sure what we're answering here.
Well, I would
Now,
say that
What will you do with that string of data?
I would.
Probably set up data collection and start raking
tonight.
calls over him.
It's tonight. You have no time. It's tonight.
Okay, then fuck it. This guy may actually be trying to plot something. I'm taking him into the room with the cameras cut off, and we're beating an answer out of him.
So you're
I
the
wouldn't
bad.
go Jack Bauer on him
I'll-
necessarily. If I
I'll
found,
go Jack Bauer on a motherfucker if he ain't talking.
I would, if I was in law enforcement, it was my job, and I came across this information, or let's just use that as the hypothetical here. If I was in law enforcement, I found this information that convicted felon was said that he was going to act tonight, and I felt, and the evidence presented was that it was I would have to gauge the credibility of the threat level. If it was a credible threat, then it would be something that I would heavily investigate and keep an eye on and try to bring light to evidence to people that are denying me search warrants to actually have a warrant to search this guy and see if he's up to anything suspicious activity. This will either lead to, one, finding out what he means, and if it's something dangerous and I have evidence that I can verify to the higher ups, then I would most likely get that warrant. Two, I would find evidence that would suggest that he's clean and I wouldn't have to act at all. It depends on the situation. It would, to me, that would warrant further investigation of the matter.
Or three, while you're busy doing that, the attack goes off and an entire town has just been doused in anthrax.
Well,
Yeah,
I would not hold that against myself. I would not hold that against myself, though.
Yeah,
because
I understand, but how many hours would you think that it will take for you to get on that?
I'm not an expert in forensics, so I would not know. If all I could do is say what would be the best course of action given those circumstances, which I would answer with more investigation and try to find or not find that there is an actual threat on our hands. That's how I would handle it, and I would do everything within the confines of the law and under the restrictions and guidelines that I would have put on me. I wouldn't, unless the only way I would act against that is if I knew for a fact that there was a terrorist threat and there was too much red tape for me to do for me to do anything, and if at a last minute decision needed to be made where I would have to if I had the capability and the means to actually stop a terrorist plot by being vigilant, by using vigilantism for the greater good, I would have to say I would be inclined to go Jack Bauer, but that would only be in a very, very, very specific set of circumstances. And
who said anything about going Jack Bauer? We're going Dark Knight on a motherfucker. Beating the heads out of him and ramming him to the bulletproof glass. Are you kidding me?
Do you understand the situation I framed here? I basically asked you a question of Hoppes or Locke. Do you know the difference between Hoppes and Locke?
Hopelessness is a state where
Hobbes. H-O, beta A.
Hobbes, like Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, Hobbes and Locke. One believed that the essence of a human being is for good. One believed that the essence of human is for bad. This question I just framed to you is that from the perspective who believes that every person, it's a valid form of thinking. I'm not saying it's a bad way of thinking, but if somebody believes their view of humanity is that every person tries to act evil towards chaos, then this kind of surveillance pills make sense. But if you believe that the social contract keeps people from basically the social contract is the only thing that keeps people from killing each other. But the other perspective is that there is no need for a social contract or anything, the social contract in this being the state or the government. Other believes that that every intention is for good, that no man ever wishes bad. I only asked you, what is your view on this?
See, I don't think in terms of Hobbes versus Locke, though. I don't think in the terms of the intent of the philosophies of it. I was thinking more on what would be the legal and morally justified things to do.
That's the Hobbes and Locke, and they were political
Hobbes and Locke, as in John Locke, and as in Leviathan and the fucking social contract guys, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I understand that, but when in answering the question, I can't think in such a large social philosophical sort of point of view. I can only think of what I do in that situation because I more or less be motivated to do my job rather than how do I phrase this? I'd be more interested in the effectiveness of what I can and cannot do on a practical, observable level over what is the moral. That's a very complicated question. I did not prepare for this.
It comes down to the moral. At what point you go to become immoral or unethical, to be exact in this situation, would be the correct term, and that's only based on your view of the essence of humanity. Once you have that framework of either view, you can make these kind of decisions quite well. And the most annoying thing when it comes to things like this, especially in ethics, is the fact that to a certain degree, there is no right answer. I'm not saying that I believe that the essence of humanity is towards chaos, and social contract that is beneficial to both sides is the only one that's keeping us from going full berserker on each other. But the fact is that I'm not saying that's any more valid than the opposite. And that's the issue when it comes to things like that. You need to create a profile of what is the view of your government as an essence. Because you have to understand, in this case, government is a being, with a metaparticle being a human in the government. You have to create this framework, and by the looks of it, the US government believes that every person's intentions are towards chaos.
Well, here's my thoughts on this. I'm more inclined to agree with Hobbes than Locke in most situations. However, giving it more thought and consideration, though. In so agreeing with Hobbes, I also agree that there is necessary action for the government to take, which does trump, in many cases, the perceived rights of the individual. However, if the rights of the individual are in no way in danger of any credibility, there is no reason to stop that person from having any rights. They should be free to do what they want. I mean, if the person wants to play a violin, for instance, there's no need for them to stop them from playing a violin. Likewise, if there's no need to stop, if there's no credible need, no credible threat that a person poses by enacting their rights for freedom of speech, if it's not an issue of security, then the argument for authoritarian thinking, in that sense that people are going to just inherently cause chaos, it's not inherently necessary in those cases. Now, there are things where I'll say that, well, basically, you can't for instance, a lot of hardcore libertarians will say that basically people have a right to not have their children vaccinated. I would argue against that because that's a public health and safety concern. But in this case here, the freedom of communication information, in most cases, there is no real argument that can be said that your thoughts that you should have your rights impeded for that.
Okay, here's the situation. Let's just say that there's I just watched the movie, I think it was Pandemic or something like, or Infection or something. It just came out of the TV. And let's just say that there's a situation which there's a disease rampage, and the only thing that is preventing full anarchy and chaos setting is one person saying the wrong words the wrong time. And once the chaos starts, it cannot be controlled anymore. No order can be restored, and there's a delicate balance between that. What will you choose? To let him speak and create a chaos that goes beyond your control. You cannot no longer reclaim control. No way. Or would you silence him in order to be beneficial to the whole society? Would you risk would you sacrifice a person for the nation?
If in this hypothetical scenario a person's words and actions would lead to ultimate anarchy and chaos, then yes, I would say that that person would need to be silenced in that case. The actions would be necessary to take against them. But in most cases, most people are going to jump on a bandwagon to a very bad idea. People will generally reject anarchy because they respect the social contract, or at least the people in the current environment of America. They will reject, most cases, they will reject, they can say for themselves, no, this idea is bad, this thing is wrong. It's not, I only see unnecessary censorship of, for security purposes, in cases where people are actually going to be harmed. For instance, the reason why we ban child pornography, it's because, you know, people get hurt with that crap. It's something that we cannot condone on any level. But when it comes to like other forms of art and entertainment, they're not. No, so long as nobody's getting hurt in the process of creating it, there's no reason to impede that. When it comes to ideas, so long as they're not encouraging riots or chaos, it's not going to. It's not something that is in the confines of reality to say that an idea in of itself is going to be able to effectively do that. I don't believe.
Actually, the right idea in the wrong place is all it takes. Example, let's just say a person who is deeply, I know this because I was really deeply depressed, I was suicidal, and all it required was that certain idea to trigger the internal chaos in me that almost made me commit suicide 3 times. It was the right idea in the wrong place, in the most vulnerable situation. There can be a certain delicate balance of power that can be disturbed by, like example, have some super cooled water. It is in its liquid form, but until you throw a little pebble in it, it freezes over and shatters the glass. All it takes is little things, and they will pile up.
Potentially, however, little things pile. Well, however, yes, that is a potential. However, there is, with the freedom of speech, with the freedom of people to talk and converse, with people who, in an environment where people are able to be skeptical of ideas and not take them on face value, and be able to inquire more and actually do their research and actually know the information, and an environment where a set of moral, a baseline of morality is generally agreed upon.
I'd say, assuming that there's certain baseline morality in as a huge society as America, in which the spectrum between just like the opinions of like the South and the North and so forth, and the evangelicals and Catholics and so forth, are so vast that certain belief, like there are certain beliefs that people like me, atheists, have no right to live, or the gay people, or otherwise deviant or different people. We cannot assume by default that the certain hypothetical situation, which we could only assume to be utopia, would exist, because at the moment you are assuming that there's some kind of utopian construct preventing people from going all rampage on each other, and
well,
which what I have seen in America doesn't really exist.
I would argue against that heavily, because I would say that society over the course of centuries or millennia has developed social norms and ideas and and guiding moral principles such as don't rape, don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, don't etc. Don't what else is there? A whole bunch, like we could go on about the law and stuff like that, but there. Well, I lost my train of thought. Hold on a second. It exists because we built it. These ideas exist because over time we have built the environment where people do acknowledge that other people's well-being and safety do not not causing harm, not causing distress, and etc. These are generally accepted principles that we can rely upon because we know the people will do this. For instance, you brought up how people are, some people are so vehemently against atheism or homosexuals that they would like to see them all burned and killed. Those people do exist, but ultimately, one, they're not going to break the law because of the consequence the law implies, so they're not going to go out and do this themselves. And two, their constituents generally will not agree with those ideas. Within the confines of Christianity, no good. There is within the beliefs of Christianity in America, they do not believe, like for the mostly do not believe in enacting violence or chaos or crime. It's just not something that is inherent to most Christians. It's not. They don't want to do that. They may do things that are distasteful to atheists or homosexuals, but it's not something that's an actual problem because they're not actually breaking the law. They're not actually committing criminal acts and are not inspiring crime or criminal acts. There is the morality within their communities.
Yeah, but you can understand that the morality is tied to their culture. In this case, their only thing that is keeping them bound is the framework of their own society. In this case, let's just say that there's a group of religious people living in some village. The only thing that prevents them from going within is the morality, but they are outsiders. And to what degree their morality goes is only tied to the dogma of the culture, on the values of that culture, because there are cultures which are extremely violent towards outsiders, and those do exist, in which outsiders are shunned. And
Sieg Heil. Pretty much, that's where we're going with this. Let's just go there already.
Yeah. The thing is that these exist, and the nature of a society is that the rules of the society only apply within it. They do not apply to outsiders. So if you have a small little society confined in its own space, the rules of that are in it. They don't apply outside of it. And if these people believe that they apply outside of it, they will act upon them. And this is something that will lead to chaos. And that's why it's important to have certain unified culture. And I think in an environment as huge as in America, it's quite hard to have that unified culture.
Well, ultimately,
yeah, but at the same time, you talk of unified cultures, and I think of Japan. I'm sorry, but unified implies oneness of thought, and sometimes you need diversity of thought in order to actually survive.
Oh, well, you have to understand that the Japanese culture is based on the Zen and Confucian principles.
Yes.
It's a totally different cultural construct. They believe in they believe that the reason for human worth is to benefit the community, while in the West we believe in personal growth and development. There they believe in the growth and development of the community. They will wait 100 years for a tree to grow, while we wait 50 years for ourselves to grow. I'm not taking any stances which is better. We just need to acknowledge the fact that it is completely different view from ours.
I know, but that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is, if you have that where it's like you would only serve this one really espoused viewpoint to the detriment of all others, you're just going to really cause cultural stagnation at the end of the day. I mean, really, that's kind of where Japan is at this point.
I don't think that's just Jason's view. I think that's I think when you do, I think it's actually just a fact. If you just stay in line with one set of principles within one ideology, set of beliefs, moral framework, or you don't ever think outside the box, you basically create an echo chamber. You do become stagnant. You do become set in your ways. And as a society,
I think. I need to. Do we mean stagnated in the way that it starts to deteriorate the environment, or stagnate in a way that the development and growth of it stops? Because I think stops. Okay, but
No,
it does not deteriorate.
It
Let's
will.
get terms correct
can.
here. No.
It
you
can
understand?
deteriorate.
Yeah,
I will.
it can.
It's
But
kind of
does
like
it or
this.
does it not in this scenario?
Well,
I
the
will
scenario
say-
I'm thinking is Japanese isolationism from like the 16th century to the late 19th. So in that case, they did kind of start to deteriorate.
They
that's
deteriorated because when you do develop an echo chamber, eventually there will be detractors and there will be people who will want to do their own things and be creative and develop and expand. So it will first stagnate, then it will deteriorate. It's a slow process, but it will happen. Once you set up this culture and environment,
Yeah, but I wouldn't. I like. Well, welcome to my academic mindset, but I don't believe that the one automatically precedes the other. It only depends on what is the essence of the culture.
I'm
If it's
sorry.
of preservation.
I'm sorry, mate, but from a historical perspective, that kind of thing where we just get stuck in one mindset and then slowly deteriorate is kind of like the hallmark of the decline of empire. You see it.
No. It
Most-
basically, how I think you mean that. Basically, I'm referring to Dark Ages, in my opinion. But you got to understand that I've come from the essence.
Finland.
No. That has nothing to do with it. I come from a certain essentialist mindset that I believe in the now of the, like, I believe that it's now, and yes, a stagnating pond can start to deteriorate, but it can also sprout a new life.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
but
exclude
it's
this
rare.
possibility. Yeah, but I wouldn't exclude it.
I wouldn't exclude it either, but like I said, the possibility of that happening is not very often.
Yeah, but we shouldn't say that the stagnation should not allow to be happen in any case.
Yeah.
Just take about the primordial pool. There was certain stagnation until the first spark of life happened. And look what we got now on this planet.
I guess I come at it from a Hegel kind of mindset of you have two ideas and then there's conflict. And then eventually you get a synthesis, and then comes conflict when people disagree with that synthesis, and so on.
Yeah, I understand the mindset, but I think it's good if we create the certain framework of like the scenario, like the instance of discussion in which that would work. Yeah, I could understand. I could even agree with that view. But the human culture is beautiful in a sense that it's quite unpredictable. The nature itself is quite unpredictable. We have found life that changes in the most hostile of environments in which we couldn't believe that there are fungi growing in Chernobyl, in Pripyat, that feeds on the radiation. That's something we couldn't have ever imagined to exist, and the environment in which it was created was clearly stagnant from other life.
Okay.
Getting all high and mighty now. We should get back to ground.
Right.
Yeah,
Everyone's a dipshit, and America sucks.
Well-
Don't ever move here.
I think-
Unless you like to rage at your politicians and demand they immediately leave. Like we shove them on a rocket and shoot them into the sun.
Well, I would think that each politician would have to be measured based on their merits and what they actually do and their pedigree and what they do, how they've actually helped or hurt us, essentially.
We've been
Measure
going
the
on
pros and
about
cons.
this for almost an hour. Can we talk about Jazz Symphony?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good idea because we actually did get way off topic with all of this talk right now, and I really
We were
can't really-
supposed to be in the Sol system. How did we end up in the Alpha Centauri sector?
have
That
no
happens
idea.
to me quite often. You'd be surprised.
Yes. Anyway, well, let me just explain what Operation Jazz Symphony is. So recently there was an Al Jazeera news piece on Gamergate, and they interviewed Brianna Wu, and they also talked with some people from Gamergate's side. Now, there was numerous factual inaccuracies with that interview, with the segment with the guests, and with the whole segment itself. It was loaded with a lot of wrong information and basically painting a picture of a narrative, basically calling for a need for censorship. And it's that's a very big issue. It's trying to get the public to be on board with the ideas that we need censorship for the betterment of ourselves, when in reality it's the opposite that's the case. The online activity, the internet is a bastion for freedom of speech and thought process of ideas, and the allowance of people to exchange information and allow to freely discuss things without the fear of being censored, corralled, or being told you have to think a certain way or you can't do a certain thing. The best benefit is that there's there is 99% of cases no threat of harm or no harm that could actually happen unless people really start digging up personal info and like releasing it or lobbying threats and acting on them. But those are the exception, not the rule. We already have laws against that sort of against sending. Threats are not covered under free speech. You can go to jail if you are if you can go to jail if files are charged against you if you threaten to kill someone on the internet, for instance. But it was clear to me that basically there are people that are interested in marginalizing the Gamergate scenario as an excuse for a reason, or rather, they want to validate this idea that the internet needs to be police censored and ruled over by people with authoritarian mindsets, and that's very troubling to me because it is a big problem with that. And on top of that, the Al Jazeera piece, which again paints us as a bunch of crazy anti-feminists. Now, what we've found is that basically when this news broke, me and a bunch of other people who were in a Skype group, we just found that Al Jazeera has an ethics policy that they abide to, and they are known for retracting misinformation because news isn't going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. But to maintain credibility, news organizations, including Al Jazeera, who has an ethics policy, will retract articles, video clips, and make corrections as necessary. So with Operation Jazz Symphony, where I will put it in the description of this video, there's a thread in Kotaku in Action on it. There's a thread on 8chan about it. Basically, the idea behind it is to contact Al Jazeera with emails and tell them where they went wrong. And there's detailed guides pointing out all the factual inaccuracies. Like one big example, for instance, is saying that Kevin Dobson was an example of Gamergate harassment. Kevin Dobson was a Twitter account that tweeted at Anita S. about threatening and harassing messages. But there was no link to Gamergate whatsoever. We don't know who or what Kevin Dobson was. All we know is that this account was created in a very short span of time, sent out a bunch of messages, and Anita highlighted them. That's all that's known about it. That's all the information we have. And to blame anyone or accuse anyone of being behind that is completely unfounded because we don't know. We don't know who made that account. And until it's known, you can't say that someone did it because, again, Kevin Dobson is just a name on the internet. We have not seen prior or since then of this person. So that's just one example. So with Operation Jazz Symphony, basically we basically let Al Jazeera know that they need to retract what they did because they are spreading misinformation. And essentially what we gathered from the piece with Brianna Wu was that they took her word for a lot of the stuff that was going on in Gamergate rather than verifying through a third party or getting an unbiased, full, objective look at the picture of what's going on and actually doing some basic research. So they failed at all fronts, including the basic use of Google.
They listened and believed.
Exactly, which is why you verify, then trust.
Yeah. I think I play in a few orchestras, and there's nothing more harmful than just listening. You need to know what is going on. You need to follow the conductor. You need to follow your sheet music. If you just believe, you will be lost.
Beware of he who would deny you access to information, for in his heart he imagines himself your master.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Anyway, tonight's stream's been interesting. We kind of covered some topics that are really about greater philosophy and law and stuff. And I did want to touch on Rebuild, but I guess we'll have to cover that another time. Next time, hopefully, we'll get a bigger audience in so we can really push and discuss a lot of things. Although right now, I think we are right in the middle of a lull because I know a lot of people are working on finals at the moment. I do appreciate the people that have come and watched.
7.
Right now we're at 7, but we made as much as 12, but it's fine. I don't mind if we have a small audience. Nick, in the meantime, keep an eye on things. Watch out for again. Big theme of tonight's show, I believe, was anti-censorship, which honestly, censorship's hardly ever, if at all, ever necessary, and you should be militantly opposed against it in almost all cases. There's very few times.
Let's put it like this: of a systematic censorship.
Okay.
I think that's better way to describe it.
Yes. And there will be a lot of excuses as to why we need censorship, such as the allegations of ill-defined harassment, women being marginalized or whatever. You've heard them all before with Gamergate. They're going to be pushing the same things with the need for basically policing what we do and say. And this is a problem, and it is definitely something that Gamergate should be aware of, because Gamergate, in a nutshell, is a fight against corruption. And censorship is a form of corruption.
Censorship, because won't someone think of the children?
Mm-hmm. Also, I'd like to promote
obsession about children.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'd also like to promote the Rebuild Initiative once more. I don't really have the patience to explain it again, but it's
just
essentially
write letters to developers and publishers you like. Handwritten letters. Write them to people you like in the industry. Show them you exist.
Right, and especially write letters to developers and publishers. Let them know that we care about what in the games industry. Let them know we care about their products and their games. Let them know that we have problems being faced with the journalistic scene, and that we want them to speak out, so that way we can help reform this industry and build better inroads between the creators of the content and the consumers of the content. And that's essentially what Rebuild is about in a nutshell. You can find more information about it on Kotaku in Action. There's an article about there is an article in the Gamergate.me wiki that you can look up, and there's also information about on 8chan, including the message goal of the day. Otherwise, does anyone have anything they'd like to promote before we close out the show?
Not really, but I'd like to say one thing about I've been writing this letter by hand in calligraphy, it's going to Blizzard. I've been writing it for 2 weeks now. It's quite long, but it's handcrafted in calligraphy with loving care, with big fancy letters and all that jazz. And imagine you receiving a letter like that. What does it say to you? Just think it from that perspective. Put some effort into it, because nothing means more to an artist than hearing that his work is being recognized.
Speaking of artists getting their works recognized, if you're interested in isometric shooters that should be played over with Linkin Park, Hatred just got kicked off Greenlight for apparently violating the terms of service, even though we have Postal 2 and Manhunt on our service. Yuck, yuck, yuck. So yeah, someone might want to figure out what the hell's going on with that.
That is interesting, although the bright side to that is that game's going to get released whether Steam validates it or not. It doesn't really matter. People will eat up that game because people are kind of tired of censorship. I personally have no interest in Hatred, but I don't want it to be banned. I don't want people to not be able to play it. People should be able to play the games they like and enjoy them. And Hatred, even though it's a game that I don't particularly care for, other people who want to play a game like that should have every right to. So that is definitely something worth looking into investigating. All right.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was sort of wondering that I've seen games like Factorio where they've been released on the private side of the developer. They sell the key to it for you, and you can access to download it. It's not an issue anymore. They can sell you a key and then share it via peer-to-peer. Nobody can stop it from being released.
Yep.
The
Essentially.
The train has no brakes and there are no exits. You're stuck on this ride forever.
Yeah, and like if Steam decides not to sell the game, well, that's their loss ultimately, and they're not going to make money, which is very surprising from someone like Gabe Newell, who is all about the money. And yeah, I do find it hypocritical that Hatred is getting pulled, but Postal and Manhunt are allowed. I think the reason behind that is because of Hatred's marketing campaign. They are definitely being a bit of a rouser with their whole with how they're going about the game. But
Going about the game, the whole reason the game exists is to get this reaction.
yeah, I'm saying the reason why Steam might be taking special exception to this particular game and citing a terms of service violation over the other games that were in question. It's not right, but is the rationalization in their minds of why this game's being pulled. I believe I can't verify that, but definitely worth looking into. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap up tonight's show. We will. I do have plans for another stream this week, which I will announce on Twitter. So stay tuned to that, and it will be a little bit more focused and a lot more on topic for what we're going to discuss. In the meantime, have a great night, everybody. Thanks all for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you for viewing this.
I'ma go pass out after downing a bottle of Jack Daniels.
Night, everybody.